Oil-producing countries, including Saudi Arabia and Russia, have agreed to cut oil production by 2 million barrels a day.
The objective behind the cuts is clear. OPEC Plus wants the prices to rise. And there is one superpower that is going to feel the pinch more than the rest.
President Biden says there will be consequences for Saudi Arabia.
Chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee vows to block all future weapons sales to Saudi Arabia.
The White House says a decision by OPEC Plus to cut oil production is a clear sign the group is aligning with Russia.
Our world is currently being held hostage, and this is a point of argument: oil. Our entire planet is powered by oil. However, the black gold economy is run by a small group of nations that control the both global price and the supply: Venezuela, as well as the oil-rich kingdoms of Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Currently, the OPEC oil cartel is causing a global oil crisis reminiscent of a similar situation in the 1970s, effectively launching an economic war with the US and forcing the US to take serious emergency measures, actions that may have a ripple effect on our daily lives. Hey viewers, welcome back to Finance Insights. In today's video, we have yet another big news that will worsen the inflation that we already are suffering from. So watch the video till the end, because we have revealed a way you can profit from this oil war. Let's get started. We are sure you are aware that the petrol prices have risen significantly in the last year. And the bad news is that they appear to be on the rise again. To explain why you are going to begin our story in America, this is the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve, also known as the SPR. The SPR is made up of several massive oil reserves, which are stored in the massive underground salt caverns in the 4 locations along the US Gulf Coast, with a capacity of 700 million barrels of oil. It was intended to serve as the country's emergency oil reserve to be used in the time of a great need, such as if a war broke out or if we need to make up for a significant oil deficit in order to keep the country running. The SPR has only been around for about 50 years, and the reason it was created in the first place was almost a mirror image of what is going on in our world today. The world experienced a severe oil crisis in the 1970s, a crisis caused by OPEC, or the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Following the Yom Kippur War, OPEC sought to punish any countries that had supported Israel in the conflict, and one of those countries was the United States. Because OPEC controlled the majority of the world's oil at the time, the shortage created tremendous global demand, causing oil prices to nearly triple almost overnight. This made the United States realize how reliant it was on foreign oil, prompting the establishment of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve in 1977 as a stockpile of emergency oil for the country. The SPR is extremely important in the story, and we will return to it shortly. Now we want to focus on OPEC, which appears to be returning to its old tricks by declaring that it will restrict the world's oil supply. OPEC will reduce its oil supply beginning in November by 2 million barrels per day. This is slightly more than 2% of what our planet uses on a daily basis. In reality, this may not seem like much, but it will almost certainly have a significant impact on global oil prices. The reason for OPEC's action is simple: they want to stabilize prices, or bring them back up after a recent slump. A move that will result in billions more profits for the oil cartel. A few years ago, raising OPEC's prices would not have an impact on the United States. However, with the current state of affairs, this is a much different story. The United States is the world's largest producer of oil, but OPEC as a whole is much larger. That is, it has enormous power to manipulate oil prices. After the 1970s oil crisis, the United States recognized this and has worked for decades to become self-sufficient in its oil supply. For the first time in decades, the United States became a net oil exporter under Donald Trump in 2018. According to some reports, this was the first time in 75 years that the country produced more oil than it needed, implying that it did not need to rely on the outside world for oil. Today, however, this is not the case. The reasons for the deficit are complicated, but they are primarily the result of Joe Biden's administration climate action. Whatever the reason, the simple fact is this: the United States currently consumes more oil than it produces, producing approximately 15 million barrels of oil per day while consuming more than 19 million barrels per day. With a deficit of nearly 5 million barrels per day, the US can no longer function without foreign oil, leaving it vulnerable to heavy manipulation by OPEC. In short, OPEC has the United States over a barrel when it comes to oil, which means the rest of us are getting screwed as well. And while OPEC is facilitating this, the real puppet master in this economic conflict is Saudi Arabia, which has been pulling the strings of OPEC's action since the beginning. Saudi Arabia has been the de facto leader of OPEC since its inception in 1960. So let's talk about SPR once more. Only 3 times since its inception has oil been removed from the SPR in 1980, 1991 and 2011, all during times of crisis such as the First Gulf War and again after Hurricane Katrina. However, oil has been flowing out of the SPR for nearly a year now. Over the last 11 months, Joe Biden has signed off on a significant removal of oil from the SPR and has just announced that his administration will remove another 15 million barrels. But this time, the reason isn't a major crisis, it's simply to keep gas prices low for Americans. So far, 26% of the United States emergency oil reserves have been depleted, bringing them to their lowest price since 1980, a risky move, according to Forbes, because of the precarious position it places the US in, and because it gives OPEC even more power to manipulate the market. All of this because OPEC wants the United States to become its largest customer, because the United States consumes more oil than any other country on the planet. The greater its oil deficit, the more oil it will have to buy from OPEC, putting billions of dollars into the pocket of the world's major oil cartels. In short, OPEC has a vested interest in ensuring that the United States uses as much of its emergency reserve as possible, but OPEC's action will affect more than just the United States. Its restriction on oil will drive up the global fuel prices. So, does the US have any leverage to counter OPEC's manipulation? No, not really. However, this could be about to change as Biden's administration's plan to make all threats to OPEC a reality. To combat OPEC, the United States is proposing the formation of NOPEC, the No Oil Producing and Exporting Cartels Act, a set of laws that were first introduced in 2007. That means the US could sanction OPEC for market manipulation. NOPEC laws were eventually enacted in 2007, but the US government has yet to implement them. The legislation was officially moved to a Senate today and will be voted on soon. And unlike the gold standard bill mentioned in last week's video, the NOPEC laws have a good chance of passing because they have bipartisan support from both Republicans and Democrats. If passed, these laws will have a real teeth, making limiting oil production or fixing oil prices completely legal, potentially leading to harsh sanctions against OPEC nations. And considering that controlling oil prices is the primary reason OPEC was formed in the first place, in theory, it could render the organization ineffective. It could also imply that Saudi Aramco, the world's largest oil producer, will be broke up, something that will seriously undermine Saudi Arabia's power, the countries that benefits the most from Aramco. To cut a long story short, what is currently taking place is essentially a war over oil, but it is being fought with economics and laws rather than weapons. However, as with any other war, there are always casualties, and in this case, there are basically every normal person on the planet. Whether you like it or not, you needed to get to work or ship your products to customers. Without it, food would quickly disappear from the supermarket shelves, international travels will cease to exist, and every product in society that contains plastic would be obsolete. As a result, OPEC's oil war will not only increase its profits, but will drive up the cost of literally everything in society, effectively turning everyone into pawns in a massive global game where the winners are only the most powerful entities on the planet. This is a news that almost no one wants to hear at a time when most of us already experience record high inflation. But this is the reality for which we should all be preparing. Long story short, OPEC's restrictions will go into effect in November. That means we should all be prepared for an increase in oil prices, or in simpler terms, an increase in oil prices. If you're already feeling the pinch from inflation and don't yet have a budget, now might be the time to make a strategy investment, because the only person who will be excited about this price increase are the ones who own the stock in an oil company. If you like this video, you might also like this recent video we did about how the US dollar is heavily connected to oil. There's a link on your screen right now. Please subscribe to our channel for regular global economic updates. We hope to see you in the next one.